Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Carter Hayes never imagined that 6 months of marriage could fall apart with a single phone call. It was Friday, almost midnight, when his phone vibrated on the coffee table. Doug, his best friend since college, rarely called after 10. Carter answered, still half distracted, watching a replay of a Suns game. The voice on the other end was tense, carrying that hesitation typical of someone about to deliver bad news. "Man, I really didn't want to do this, but you need to see something. I'm sending you some pictures now. Sorry, brother." Carter's heart started racing before he even opened the messages. When the images loaded, the floor seemed to disappear under his feet. There was Mallory, his wife, at a trendy bar in Scottsdale, wrapped around another man. It wasn't a friendly hug or a misunderstood photo. It was a kiss. A long, intimate kiss that left no room for doubt. The man was Brendan, the owner of the gym where Mallory worked as a personal trainer. Carter recognized the tanned face, the confident smile he'd seen plastered across the gym's promotional posts. Doug had written under the photos, "I was here with people from work, saw her on the other side of the bar. Tried to leave without seeing more, but thought you had to know. Sorry, man." Carter froze on the couch, staring at the images until the screen went black. He called Doug back, who confirmed everything with details Carter didn't want to hear but needed to. Mallory had been there for hours, drinking, laughing, leaning on Brendan as if they were a couple. As if Carter didn't exist. As if the vows they had exchanged 6 months earlier in her parents' backyard were just empty words. Carter couldn't sleep. He stayed up all night replaying the last few months in his mind, searching for the signs he should have noticed. And they were there, screaming in retrospect. Mallory had changed after the wedding. Not abruptly, but gradually, like a tide that quietly recedes. She began talking about needing space to grow, about finding herself as a woman, not just a wife. Carter thought it sounded like cliché self-help talk, but he supported her. After all, he wanted her to be happy. Friday nights with friends became routine. Mallory would go out dressed up, smelling great, always saying she was unwinding from the week. Carter stayed home, watched TV, played video games, and trusted her. Because that's what you did in a marriage, right? You trusted. What an idiot he'd been. When the sun rose over Phoenix that Saturday morning, Carter already had a plan. He wasn't the impulsive type, but this situation demanded quick action. He grabbed his laptop, transferred Doug's photos into a protected folder, saved copies to the cloud, and printed 3 sets in high resolution. Each picture was a stab in the chest, but also ammunition. Then he called a divorce attorney a coworker had once recommended when another supervisor got divorced. The office was closed on Saturdays, but Carter left a message on the answering machine, his voice steady despite his shaking hands. "My name is Carter Hayes. I need a divorce. It's urgent. I have proof of adultery. I'll call Monday morning." Then he sat in the kitchen and waited. Mallory had come home at 3 in the morning, slightly stumbling, locking herself in the bathroom before collapsing in bed. Carter had heard everything from the couch, where he'd spent the night without closing his eyes. Now it was almost 10 in the morning, and she was still asleep. When she finally came downstairs, wearing a short pajama set, hair messy, she yawned and went straight to the coffee maker. Carter sat at the kitchen table, the photos spread in front of him like a cursed deck of cards. "Sleep well?" Carter's voice came out calmer than he expected. Mallory turned, still holding an empty mug. "Like a rock. Those margaritas were way too strong." She laughed, but the smile vanished when she saw his expression. "What? What's wrong?" Carter pushed the photos toward her. Mallory stepped closer, frowning, then stopped. The color drained from her face as if someone had flipped a switch. The mug slipped from her fingers and shattered on the tile floor. "Carter, I can explain. He stood up but didn't go near her. He didn't trust himself to. You're going to explain how you ended up with your boss's tongue down your throat in a bar in Scottsdale? Please, enlighten me. She swallowed hard, eyes wide, searching for words that wouldn't come. It's not what it looks like. I was drunk, it was a mistake, a mistake. Carter let out a dry, humorless laugh. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk. A mistake is leaving the light on. This, he pointed to the photos, this is a choice. Several choices. You chose to go out, to drink with him, to kiss him. And I'm sure you chose a lot more than that. Mallory started crying, but the tears didn't move Carter. He had exhausted all his pity during the sleepless night. How many times, Mallory? How many Fridays did you spend with him instead of unwinding with the girls? She shook her head, sobbing. Carter, please listen. We can get through this. It was just a phase, I was confused, you've been so focused on work, I felt neglected and, oh, I see. So it's my fault. His voice dropped dangerously low. I work 40 hours a week to pay our bills, our house, your car, and somehow that gives you the right to cheat? Brilliant logic, Mallory. Really brilliant. She took a step forward, reaching out. We can go to therapy, start over, I'll end it with him, I promise. Have you ended it yet? Carter crossed his arms. The silence that followed was answer enough. Great. So you were planning to continue. How long, Mallory? Until I found out? Until you got bored of him and found the next one? It's not like that. I love you, Carter, I was just lost, I needed to feel wanted again, to feel like I mattered beyond being a wife and a trainer. Brendan made me feel special. Special. Carter repeated the word like poison. He made you feel special while I was here trusting you, planning our future, thinking about having kids with you someday. Meanwhile, you were building a second life with the guy who pays you minimum wage to teach squats. Mallory flinched like she'd been slapped. You don't have to be cruel. Cruel? Carter stepped forward now, and she backed away. I'm not being cruel, Mallory. I'm being honest. Cruelty is what you did to me. Cruelty is lying to my face for weeks, coming back to our bed after being with him, kissing me good morning with the same mouth that had kissed another man hours earlier. That's cruelty. She fell to her knees in the middle of the kitchen, surrounded by pieces of the broken mug, crying in a way that might have broken Carter's heart under other circumstances. But that heart was already in pieces. Get up, Mallory. You're going to need some dignity for what comes next. She lifted her face, confused through tears. What do you mean? I mean Monday morning I'm calling my lawyer and filing for divorce. I have proof of adultery, which makes things pretty simple in Arizona. You won't see a cent in alimony. And about the division of assets, we'll have a very interesting conversation about what's actually yours and what I paid for before we married. Her crying grew louder, but Carter was already mentally gone from that kitchen, from that house, from that marriage. You can stay here today to pack your things. Tomorrow, I want you out. Go to your parents, go to Brendan's, go wherever. Just don't stay here. Carter, please, don't do this. We can try again, I'll change, I swear. You know what's the saddest part, Mallory? Carter knelt in front of her, looking into her red, swollen eyes. You don't even realize what you destroyed. You're crying because you got caught, not because you're sorry. And even if you were truly sorry, it wouldn't matter. Because I'll never be able to look at you without seeing those pictures again. I'll never trust another word you say. And a marriage without trust isn't a marriage, it's just two people living together and lying. He stood up and left the kitchen, leaving her sobbing on the floor. He went to the guest room where he'd spent the night, grabbed his car keys, and left. He needed air, space, anything but that house full of memories now poisoned. Carter drove aimlessly through Phoenix, passing places that had marked their relationship. The Mexican restaurant where they'd had their first date. The theater where they watched half a dozen bad movies just to hold hands in the dark. The park where he'd proposed at an orange sunset straight out of a movie. Everything felt fake now, like it had been staged. Maybe it always had been. Maybe Mallory had never been who he thought she was. Or maybe people changed, and he just hadn't noticed in time. On Sunday, when Carter came home late in the afternoon, most of Mallory's things were gone. Clothes, beauty products, that ridiculous collection of scented candles she loved. The closet was half empty, the bathroom echoed. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter in her round handwriting he'd always liked: "Carter, I'm so sorry. More than you'll ever believe. I ruined everything and have no excuse. I'll be at my mom's. My lawyer will contact yours. Take care." He crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash. Monday morning, Carter called the attorney's office as soon as it opened. James Kowalski, a Polish man in his 50s with a reputation as a shark in divorce cases, called back after hearing the message. They scheduled a meeting that afternoon. Carter brought the photos, bank statements showing he paid most of the household expenses, proof the car Mallory drove was in his name, everything. James flipped through the documents with clinical efficiency. "Mr. Hayes, Arizona is an equitable distribution state, but proven adultery weighs heavily in favor of the innocent spouse, especially regarding alimony. With this evidence, your wife has practically no chance of receiving support. As for the assets, since you've only been married 6 months and have no children, the process should be relatively quick. I'll need a list of everything acquired before and during the marriage." Carter did everything the lawyer asked. He answered emails, signed papers, attended hearings. The process took 3 months of his life, 3 months of bureaucracy and tense negotiations between lawyers. Mallory tried to contest some things, claiming she deserved part of the house's value because she had, emotionally contributed to the home. James destroyed that argument in 15 minutes, presenting the photos and Doug's testimony confirming the affair. The final twist came from an unexpected place. 2 weeks before the final divorce hearing, Carter got a call from an unknown number. It was a woman, young and nervous. "Hi, is this Carter Hayes?" "Yes, who's this?" "My name's Adriana. Was Brendan's girlfriend. He owns the gym where your wife works." Carter sat on the edge of the bed. "Was? He dumped me. I found out it was because of her, Mallory. They'd been having an affair for months, even before you got married. I found old chats on his computer, pictures, everything. He used money that was ours, that we'd saved to open a franchise, to pay for hotels and gifts for her." The anger in her voice was palpable. "Adriana, I'm sorry for what you went through. I know how it feels. I know you do. That's why I'm calling. I want him to pay for what he did. I have more evidence, conversations where they laugh about you, about me, about everyone. I can send everything to your lawyer if you want. And one more thing, Brendan's broke. The gym's drowning in debt. He owes 3 months' rent. Without me funding it, it's going under. And your ex-wife thinks he's going to take care of her after the divorce. Thought you should know." Carter thanked her and gave her James's number. The new evidence sealed the case. It not only proved the affair started earlier than Carter thought, but also showed Mallory had planned to leave him eventually, just waiting for the right time. In the messages Adriana provided, Mallory and Brendan openly discussed how they'd get rid of the dead weight and start a new life together. Carter read it all with a mix of disgust and relief. Disgust for having been so deceived. Relief for finding out before wasting more years, before having kids, before being even more tied to that woman. At the final hearing, the judge was direct. Proven adultery, short marriage, no children, clear division of premarital assets. Mallory left court with no alimony, no rights to the house, no car. Only her clothes and the furniture she'd brought into the marriage. Carter kept the house in Plano, the car, the savings. Mallory tried to look at him one last time as she left the courtroom, but Carter looked away. There was nothing left to say. The epilogue came quickly. Brendan fired Mallory 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized. Without Adriana to fund the gym, the business went bankrupt. Mallory tried to sue for wrongful termination but had no contract, and Brendan simply shut the place down. She moved back with her parents at 32, taking random fitness classes at small neighborhood gyms, earning a fraction of what she used to. Carter, on the other hand, made a radical choice. He sold the house in Plano for a decent profit and bought a used Airstream trailer. He requested 6 months of unpaid leave, something his company granted since he hadn't taken a vacation in 5 years, and just left. He drove across the country with no fixed plan. Camped in national parks, met people in small towns, ate in roadside diners, watched sunrises at the Grand Canyon and sunsets on the West Coast. Slept under the stars in Utah, swam in deserted beaches in Florida, got lost in the Colorado mountains. For the first time in years, maybe ever, Carter had no obligations. He didn't have to answer to anyone, didn't have to worry about expectations or disappointment. It was just him, the road, and the time he needed to process everything that had happened. In the first few months, he still thought about Mallory often. Anger, sadness, confusion, each came in waves. But gradually, mile after mile, those emotions faded. He began to realize that what he'd lost wasn't as valuable as he thought. He'd lost a lie, an illusion of marriage. And maybe that was a blessing in disguise. Better to find out in 6 months than in 6 years, with kids and a life even more entangled. When he returned to Phoenix after 6 months, Carter was unrecognizable. Tan, bearded, slimmer, and somehow stronger. He went back to work with renewed energy, not because he loved the job, but because he needed structure while figuring out his next steps. Using his savings, he started his own logistics consulting company, something he'd always wanted but never dared to do. He began small, from home, but within a year had 3 steady clients and was hiring his first employee. His social life also changed. Carter didn't go looking for a relationship. He focused on himself, rebuilding trust not in others, but in his own judgment. He went to therapy, something he'd never considered, and realized he'd ignored warning signs not only in his marriage but in many past relationships. He had a pattern of choosing women who seemed stable on the surface but carried chaos underneath. It was Doug who introduced him to Rachel, at a casual birthday party 15 months after the divorce. Rachel was an elementary school teacher with a genuine smile and an uncomplicated way of seeing life. They talked about children's books, about how kids are brutally honest, about travel and postponed dreams. Carter didn't ask for her number. He didn't want to rush. But the next day, Rachel texted through Doug, saying she'd enjoyed talking and they'd be wrong not to meet again. They took things slow. Coffee dates, walks, simple dinners. Rachel knew about the divorce, knew Carter still had fresh scars, and never pushed. She was patient, open about her feelings and expectations, everything Mallory had never been. 6 months later, when Carter finally caught himself thinking about the future again, about commitment, about building something solid, he realized he wasn't scared. He was excited. Because Rachel wasn't Mallory. And he wasn't the same naive Carter who trusted blindly. He was someone who had learned to read between the lines, to ask hard questions, to stop ignoring red flags for convenience. 2 years after Doug's call that changed everything, Carter sat on the porch of a new house he'd bought in Tempe, smaller than the one in Plano but completely his. Rachel was inside, cooking dinner while playing music too loud. He smiled. Life had come full circle, but the circle didn't close where it started. It closed somewhere better, somewhere real. Doug showed up for dinner with craft beer. As the 3 of them laughed at one of Rachel's stories about a student who brought a lizard to class, Carter thought about Mallory for the first time in weeks. Not with anger. Not with pain. Just with a distant, involuntary sense of gratitude. Because in the end, Mallory had done him a favor. She'd blown up that mediocre life before it became permanent. She'd forced Carter to rebuild from scratch, and in that rebuilding, he found a version of himself he never knew existed. A stronger, clearer, more honest version. A version that would never again settle for scraps of affection or half-truths. A version that knew his own worth. Carter lifted his beer in a silent toast. To discoveries. To new beginnings. To finding not just a good lawyer, but himself. Across town, Mallory was leaving another double shift at a chain gym, exhausted, behind on bills, still living with her mother, who never missed a chance to remind her of the good marriage she ruined. Brendan had vanished, somewhere in California trying to start over. The friends Mallory used as alibis on those Friday nights had drifted away once the truth came out. She was alone, in her 30s, starting from zero in a way she'd never imagined. Sometimes, late at night, Mallory would scroll through Carter's social media. She saw his travel photos, then his new business, then Rachel. He looked happy. He looked free. And the truth Mallory couldn't even admit to herself was that she had never deserved him. She'd had something real and thrown it away for a cheap fantasy with a man who only wanted a consequence-free thrill. Carter Hayes had truly rediscovered himself. But that rediscovery hadn't come from finding something outside the marriage, it came from having the courage to walk away from a marriage that wasn't real and build an authentic life. And that, Carter now knew, was the only rediscovery that really mattered. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.